For 12 years, Mara Bennett had treated the old Willowmere Lodge in Pinewater Valley as a place where every branch of her family could gather. But one autumn afternoon, while preparing for a long-planned family reunion, she overheard her older brother Graham tell her adopted 9-year-old daughter Sophie that she would not be welcome at the lodge because she was not really part of the family. And the careless words instantly erased every happy memory Sophie had been building in her mind about the weekend. Sophie had spent days drawing pictures of the lake, packing her favorite yellow sweater, and asking whether they could make cinnamon apples over the fire, so when she quietly slipped her hand into Mara's and whispered, "Did he mean I'm not supposed to come?" Mara felt a deep ache in her chest and realized that this was no longer an argument between adults, but a moment her daughter might remember for the rest of her life. Instead of confronting Graham in front of everyone, Mara took Sophie into the quiet hallway, knelt beside her, and promised that nobody's cruel opinion could change the fact that she was her daughter, while behind them the rest of the family continued arranging food and luggage as if nothing important had happened. When Mara returned to the living room, she noticed her mother Evelyn, her sister Nora, and Graham's wife Claire avoiding her eyes, and she calmly asked, "If this gathering is only for people who meet Graham's definition of family, why are we pretending this house belongs to everyone?" Graham laughed nervously and told her she was making a simple comment far too serious, but Mara simply replied, "A comment can reveal what someone truly believes when they think nobody will challenge them." Assumed Mara was bluffing when she announced that the reunion was canceled, because for years he had acted as though Willowmere Lodge were a shared family property, and everyone had grown accustomed to using it without asking permission. But Mara quietly walked to the kitchen, opened an old wooden drawer, and removed a weathered folder containing documents that had been untouched since their grandfather's death. She placed the folder on the table and explained that their grandfather, Thomas Bennett, had left the property solely to her after she had spent his final year managing his appointments, restoring the neglected grounds, and helping him remain in his own home when everyone else had already accepted that he would need to move into assisted living. For years, Mara had never mentioned the ownership because she believed the lodge was more valuable as a gathering place than as something she could claim for herself, and she had willingly paid for the roof repairs, insurance, property taxes, plumbing problems, winter maintenance, and countless other expenses while telling herself that keeping the family together mattered more than receiving recognition. Graham stared at the documents as though they were written in another language, then insisted that their grandfather had always talked about the lodge belonging to the entire family. But Mara reminded him that loving a place together and legally owning it were two very different things. The following morning, Mara made a decision nobody expected. She contacted Elena Ruiz, a local property manager, and asked her to suspend every existing access code, cancel the upcoming family reservation, and prepare the lodge for a completely different kind of weekend, while Graham's furious calls began arriving almost immediately after the electronic locks were changed. "You cannot throw everyone out because of one stupid sentence," he shouted over the phone, but Mara answered, "I didn't remove anyone from the family. I stopped allowing people to use my home while treating my child like she has to earn the right to belong." That evening, Graham arrived at the lodge with several relatives expecting to begin the reunion anyway, only to discover that their old access cards no longer worked, and a handwritten notice on the gate instructed them to contact Mara before entering the property. Evelyn called her daughter repeatedly, pleading that she come back and settle the matter peacefully, but Mara refused to return to the old pattern of apologizing simply because she had finally defended herself. And when Sophie asked whether they were really going to lose the weekend, Mara smiled and said, "No, sweetheart, we're going to make a better one." Of leaving, Mara drove Sophie to the lodge herself, where the two of them spent the first afternoon doing everything they had planned without the people who had made the trip feel like a test of belonging. And Sophie soon forgot the argument as she chased falling leaves across the lawn, skipped stones across the lake, and helped Mara prepare a dinner that was far less sophisticated than the family feast they had originally planned. After sunset, they sat beside the fire beneath a sky crowded with stars, and Sophie finally asked the question Mara had been dreading. "If I wasn't born into this family, Why did you choose me?" Mara held her close and answered, "Because sometimes the strongest families are the ones people build deliberately, one promise and one act of love at a time." Next morning, Mara discovered that her grandfather's old workshop contained a box of handwritten notes he had left behind, including one addressed simply to the person who keeps this place open. And inside he had written about how a home should never become a trophy or a weapon, but should remain a place where people could feel safe, especially those who had spent their lives wondering whether they belonged somewhere. Reading those words changed Mara's plans completely, because she realized that protecting the lodge did not mean guarding it from everyone, but choosing carefully what kind of people and memories would be allowed through its doors. Within weeks, Mara created a small community program called Open Door Weekends, partnering with a nearby children's support organization to offer short stays at Willowmere Lodge to families who rarely had the opportunity to take a peaceful vacation together. And she transformed the unused guest rooms into warm spaces filled with board games, books, craft supplies, blankets, and handwritten welcome cards. Sophie became her enthusiastic assistant, making colorful signs for each visiting family and proudly telling every child who arrived, "You don't have to prove anything here. You're already welcome," while Mara watched the lodge become exactly what her grandfather had hoped it would be. Graham eventually sent a long apology, admitting that his words had come from an old belief that family was something determined by blood and tradition rather than loyalty, kindness, and choice. But Mara did not immediately invite him back because forgiveness, she had learned, did not require pretending that nothing had happened. Months later, after Graham apologized directly to Sophie without making excuses and promised that he understood why his behavior had been wrong, Mara allowed him to visit again under one condition. Willowmere Lodge would never again be a place where anyone had to defend their right to belong. A year after the disastrous reunion, the lodge hosted its first large open-door weekend, and as laughter echoed from the porch and children ran toward the lake with towels over their shoulders, Mara stood beneath the same brass lantern her grandfather had once repaired by hand and finally understood why he had trusted her with the property. She looked at Sophie, now confidently welcoming another nervous child through the front door, and realized that the greatest inheritance she had received was not the land, the building, or the legal documents, but the opportunity to turn one painful family conflict into a place where nobody would ever again be told they were less worthy of love. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to our channel and share this video with your friends and family. We create entertaining and inspiring stories for our viewers, and your support helps us continue making great content for you.